Hi, this is Henry Sanders back with another episode of Real Talk. We want to thank our sponsors at Park Bank. Thank you for everything that you're doing. Thank you for helping us again this year. Make sure we get this content out and hearing people's wonderful stories and all the things they've accomplished over the years. If you want more of this content, make sure you go to our YouTube page or wherever you get your podcast. Today, I have someone who I consider family, someone who you can see I'm smiling here because I have so much respect for this person. You know, you all have heard me say this before. I don't like everyone, but I love everyone, right? But I actually like this person, and even more important than that, I respect her like so much. Of older I get, I respect people who have longevity, who've actually done the work consistently over time. And she's just a thought leader, a practitioner, a community builder, a fighter, an advocate, a champion. She is everything that you want in a leader. And I know D&I is a new word today. She was doing D&I work before it was D&I work, right? So this is my good friend. I don't even want to say she's my family. I was going to say friend, but she's my family. Shiva, how are you?
I'm great. It's just so great to be with you, Henry, and you are family. We've been in this journey for such a long time, and here we are. Real talk.
Real talk. So, my wife says hello. So my wife wanted to say hello. She loves you. She said, "Tell Shiva
I love her very much too, and I like her a lot." So both of you, it's just our paths have been so interesting because my path really crossed with you, but then crossed really very closely with Emily, with your wife, and the work that we did together. Again, way back when D&I wasn't talked about. She was there with me. So anyways, just life, right? The paths of life.
Yes. And now you're doing, I was going to say you're doing big things. You were doing big things back then, but now you're big things. You retired from being on the city council. Thank goodness that you did that. Thank goodness I've always said, get off the council. So I'm glad you did that. You're now at UW Health doing big things. What's your title at UW Health right now? Diversity?
Vice President and Chief Diversity Officer.
Oh, Vice President and Chief. Wow.
Vice President and Chief.
That's serious business.
I got V and C.
Wow.
Going.
Vice President and Chief. That totally fits you though. Vice President in Chief, Shiva. Okay, so Shiva, a lot of people know about you, or think they know about you, right? And it's funny. Some people think you're Latina. Some people think they don't know where you fit in their box. And now you're doing all this wonderful stuff. You're on city council. You do UW Health. You've just done wonderful stuff. But where did Shiva come from? Like, where do they make Shivas in the world? It's like, where were you born? Seriously, like someone who does all the stuff that you've done and who's so committed, like there's a sacrifice, the type of commitment that you've made. No question about that. You had to sacrifice a lot to do the work, committed to serve the community as much as you have. But where did that come from? Like, so you're not from Madison. Where are you originally from?
I'm not from Madison. So, I'll just reflect, Henry, that you said people try to put you in a box, right? And well, I guess I'm in a box right now. And these Zoom loves boxes too. It's been part of, I think, my something that I've struggled with, because I'm like, I don't want to be put in a box. I'm all of my layers of life experience are made me who I am, and I just don't feel like the box fits. So, but to answer directly your question, I was born in Tehran, Iran, and both my parents are from Iran. That would be in Central Asia. So that's where I'm from.
Well, so stop. So how long were you in Iran?
So I left Iran when I was 9 years old.
So you were there for a while. 9, and that's a good chunk of your life.
9 is it depends how old you are. It doesn't seem like a big chunk of life anymore. But at some point it did seem like half of my life. So, but I was still pretty, young age when we moved to Spain.
Why did you move?
So we moved because of the revolution, the Iranian Revolution, and the unrest that we were experiencing. And there were tear gas everywhere. The government forces shooting at the demonstrators. Schools closed. I came from a father who was a businessman. He came from he built his own business, came from, we can talk about it if you want or not, but it came from a very poor background and built his own business. He was a businessman, a very successful in what he did, headed the Chamber of Commerce in Tehran. So it was kind of like he was this businessman, and so he was seen at the time as one of the middle class, kind of the nascent middle class, was one of the targets of, I guess, the unrest and changes. Back again, everybody put everybody in a box. It was like everybody in middle class was kind of bad without really the layers of, there were some people that had earned kind of the hard work, and some that had, been part of corruption, but there was different, right? But so anyway, so there was a lot of civil unrest, schools closed.
Let me ask you though, because for people who might not know, can you explain what the revolution was about? What was that about at that time?
So the revolution really was about, a popular revolution of people really being fed up with the way that the monarchy, the Shah, was leading the country, a monarchy that was very corrupt, extremely corrupt, and was very much supported by the U.S. government. Really, the rich were becoming richer, a story that repeats itself in many places because of the corruption of the government, and also a very focused Westernization. So colonialism comes to mind. So really adopting and internalizing, I think, colonialism in ways of that really were taking over the culture and background of the country. So people were like, hey, we don't want to be a Western country. We want to be our own country with our own culture and background. And so that's how the revolution started. And then, just like many movements, the revolution then was really taken over by a specific faction, which was, the very, I would say, still radical Islamists who really wanted to set up a Islamic Republic and really base everything in the country on the basis of Islam, and have a religion be really the basis of leading the country. But when the revolution started, and this is a story I think that is forgotten in the history that's being told, was a lot of people from a lot of different places in their lives, including my family members. None of the people that I knew were pro-monarchy and pro-Shah. I mean, maybe some people, but the close ones. So, I mean, if people were coming together saying no to that regime, it was just that people didn't know what they were saying yes to yet, because it wasn't clear. But they were saying no to that. And I always remember my grandmother said, well, be careful what you say no to without knowing what you say yes to, because it may be worse. And, well, like many things in life, my grandmother ended up being correct. So anyway, so everybody was saying no to a lot of people were saying no, but the government responded in full violence and force, and people were being killed on the street. I remember actually counting people that were being killed from the rooftop of our house after a clash.
You were literally counting as a child?
Yeah, we were literally counting. I remember with my cousin that we were like hiding on the rooftop, and we were like, oh, they are just shooting at the demonstrators. So that's kind of what was going on. And I think, of course, my dad felt that, one, the schools had closed and he didn't want us to stay behind in our schooling. Two, he felt that, the situation was kind of dangerous and we would be safer if we left. He also thought this was temporary, that things were going to kind of be figured out, right? That,
makes sense.
This is temporary. Go for 6 months until things calm down. We'll figure out what the new government will look like and what's going to happen.
Go to Spain for 6 months.
Go to Spain for 6 months with your mom and your brothers. I'll stay here, and then things will, it's temporary.
Well, did they say why Spain, not the United States, or whatever?
Yeah, actually, there was a reason. My grandmother or my other grandmother. So my maternal grandmother is the one that moved to Spain earlier. She already was living in Spain. My paternal grandmother is the one I quoted that says nothing, don't be careful what you say no and yes to. But so my maternal grandmother had already moved to Spain because she actually was a very politically involved person, and she just didn't like the regime. And she'd moved to Spain because she just didn't agree with a lot of things in Iran, and she was at an older age. So she had moved to Spain and stayed there. And we had also, then we had an apartment that my dad had just recently purchased right next to her for to spend summers in Spain. So there was like a place, like literally there was a place for us to go, which is... Okay. I feel so lucky that was the case, right? Because for a lot of immigrants, you just go and you don't even have a place. Like you have to figure out even where you're going to live. Like what's the roof going to be over your head? We, just like many things, I've been very privileged in my life. And that was a lot of privilege to be able to go somewhere where we did have a place to stay.
So because it sounds like you're saying your dad stayed in Iran. And
he did.
So he stayed there. And the family left and went to Spain. How long did you stay in Spain before you decided, oh, this is not going to end, and we're going to stay in Spain for a while?
We never went back. So my dad never moved actually to Spain. Because so we're talking about points in time. So first, they thought it was temporary. So my dad was like, okay, I'll stay. Then my dad actually was not allowed to leave the country. He was put on a list of those who are not allowed to leave the country because he was a businessman. And those were considered then people who were not following the philosophy of the new Islamic Republic of Iran. All of his assets were nationalized, everything he had built. Nothing. So everything was nationalized.
Wow.
And so he lost everything. Everything he had built was lost. He was not able
you would think they'd just kick him out. If you don't want, you would think if you don't want him there, just kick him out if you don't want him there.
No, they killed, many of his friends were actually executed and killed. So I'm not talking like he was, and so it was a very dangerous time. People were hiding. Because you can literally be executed. So many of his friends were, and he was not allowed to leave the country. And then a war started with Iraq.
Iraq war, yeah.
A war that was, at which time the U.S. government was supporting Saddam Hussein, who remains, history, as I said, has really weird path. But at that time, the U.S. was supporting Saddam Hussein in the war against Iran because the bad guys were the people in the government in Iran. And Saddam Hussein apparently at the time was supposedly a good guy. I don't know.
This was what 1970s?
1980.
80.
About that.
Geez, and it's
Okay, like the revolution, 1978, 1979. The war started in 1980.
I was talking about the revolution, yeah.
Yeah, then things even got worse because now there was a war. 1 million young Iranians died in this war. The war went on for a long time. Again, my dad was kind of there and couldn't leave for a number of years. And then he finally was able to come. So for a long time, my mom was raising her 3 young children on her own, having lost her country, no husband there to help, new language, new country, and losing also all of our assets and money and everything that they had built together. And so we didn't see my dad for a number of years, where he finally was able to leave the country and come visit us in Spain. And then after that, he was able to come and visit us and stay with us for periods of time. But he always still had hopes for a change, and a strong believer that he needed to stay to help his own country. So that's what happened.
And you had siblings?
I have 2 brothers, and I'm the middle child.
I would love to see you around your siblings and see how they act around you. I would love to see. I would pay money to see that.
So my older brother is just 16 months older than I am, and then my younger brother is 10 years younger. So a big I'm the middle one, the only daughter, sister, and I'd also kind of a span of difference of ages between my older brother, myself, and then our younger brother. So, but yeah, I'm definitely the middle child, and the woman in between. So you can understand some of my personality traits, I think, based on that.
Totally. Oh my gosh, I can see that now. And okay, so you're in Spain. You're there. Do you go to school in Spain? You go to high school in Spain?
Yeah. So I get to Spain, and at that age, and go through all my schooling until I finish high school in Spain. A very a time that was a both defining and also very difficult time for me. I think it's the time where I definitely woke up to the experiences of race and racism and being bullied, and what it is to feel like you're the other. So it may be important for me to mention that when I was growing up, my early age in Iran, I was surrounded with a very diverse group of people, in the sense that my neighborhood where I grew up was actually the majority Jewish neighborhood. We were, a Muslim family. So my friends, we would go to the synagogue, and we would, and then we had Baha'i friends. And so my parents were kind of very, very much so, had a very kind of diverse group of friends that we would hang up in the neighborhood in itself. So we would be in the street. And so there were a lot of the American soldiers and military families lived in the neighborhood. The American school was close to our neighborhood. So, we kind of had that contact with Americans at that time, which, and then my grandmother actually had worked in my maternal grandmother in the diplomatic corps, and she was a cultural attaché in a number of places. And so through that, she knew all kind of the people that work in the different embassies, and specifically, some of her very good friends were from the people that work in the embassy of Senegal. So anyways, it was like a very kind of this is how it is. Like your neighborhood can be very diverse, etc. So now I go to Spain, and I'm the other. I didn't speak Spanish at all. And everybody in that school, so it was a K to 12 school where everybody was in the same K to 12 school from the very beginning to finishing high school. So I land in the middle of people who have been together for already all these years, fifth grade. And I literally was the other. And so, and I was a very quiet child. I know it's hard, but you can ask my older brother. I actually was that child that, like, when I first went to kindergarten, they told my mom that they thought I had language acquisition issues because I didn't speak much. I didn't say anything. I just would observe and listen, and I just loved to be in my room playing with my own things, and build my own little, doll houses and do my thing and read. I loved reading. So I was like that kid that didn't say much. My older brother, if you ever meet him, you will understand. He loves to talk, and he is, 6'1", burly guy who loves to joke and laugh, and he's just like this big personality, lovely personality. So I was like, yeah, like that's him and me. And so when I got to this school and that was my personality, I was not going to get very far.
But you know what? It's interesting to listen to your story and knowing you now. That tells me so much. Well, first, where you came from, seeing that struggle, but being around that diversity, which is totally you, right? Like, I started this conversation by saying you're not Latina, saying that on purpose, because I think a lot of people think because you're so bilingual and you speak different languages, like you speak, 5 different languages, something like that? Four. So I think, people can't put you in a box, but then hearing your struggle going to Spain and having that struggle of trying to not fit in, but try to fit in. Yeah. But I actually think that played out for you, it worked for you, right? Because that skill set of being the other also helped you connect the dots to so many different people, how you do now. You're one of the few people connect dots to different worlds. Like, I don't care if it's Black, Latina, Asian, you're someone who connects all the dots and do it very comfortably because you're kind of the other, right? Like, you're kind of that other who kind of learn how to survive that. Fascinating to hear that. So, okay. Did you date? How did you date? Were you dating then? How was the dating scene as a girl from Iran in Spain? Like, did they boyfriends, girlfriends? Like, how did that?
So it really it was again, it was a different time. We're talking about the 80s. So that's like the 80s in Spain were like really a time of a lot of kind of opening up again. Another historic context. That's the time where Spain's Franco died. So we went from one place to another place that was actually in the midst of like a big change, right? Like Franco died after those many years of this dictatorship, democracy started, and people really wanted to really enjoy freedom. And so it was like, whoa, like party scene Spain, right? That's kind of where we landed. And here was like this quiet, girl from Iran in like this place that has like a very different culture and personality. So I partied a lot in the 80s, and I was not the popular girl at all in high school. Actually, I was with the not popular group. We were kind of punks, like literal punks, not like punk, like black punk. And that was our scene. And yes, I mean, I started kind of dating, but it was always very difficult too, because again, I was always the other. I was always seen as, you are not from here, which I still get. I'm never from anywhere because I'm not from here either. Madison, not from here. But there it was like, I'm not from there. So difficult, I think. So I didn't really start like having any like serious dating until I went to college.
And where was college?
So college was in Belgium.
Oh my gosh. So you're like jumping everywhere. Like you're like a world jet setter. So now you're in Belgium.
Now I'm in Belgium, and the reason Belgium, because people are like, what?
Yeah.
So I was 17 when I graduated from high school, 17, and I graduated from a dual language high school, which was Spanish and French.
Okay? That's why you speak French.
That's why I speak French. It was a dual language. So just like the dual language immersions that we have here, that was a dual language immersion since the country's language was Spanish and French. So then I wanted to go to a French-speaking country for my college because I just wanted to go somewhere where I, go somewhere else, far away from where I was. So I picked the map of Europe and I was like, oh, where can I go? So French-speaking countries, Belgium, France, and Switzerland, French-speaking side. My dad said, you're not going to Paris by yourself at 17. Like, no way. Although, I was accepted at La Sorbonne, which is, a huge school to get in. But my dad was like, no way, not.
So you were smart. You were smarty pants.
I was a smarty pants.
Yeah. So you're a punk, but a nerd at the same time.
Fascinating. It was very fascinating, right? I know my best friend and I were like the A students who were also like the punks. So we did get a lot of hate on us for that. But that's, the popular girls in high school did not like us.
Yeah. Yeah.
So anyway, so then I was like, okay, well, no, we're not going to Paris. And whereas the next Switzerland, really expensive. And so Belgium sounded like a place. And my dad had a very good friend that lived there. And so he was like, you're going there because I got eyes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I got people that I know, so go there. So that's where I ended up in Belgium. In the southern part of Belgium, which is the French-speaking part.
Okay. So you're in Belgium. You're still different in Belgium.
Absolutely.
And you might be more different. You might be more different in Belgium on some spectrums, right? How was that experience from Iran to Spain to Belgium? Like, those are huge different culture shifts too. What was that Belgium experience like? Did you feel the outsider there too? Or did they welcome you in more?
No, I mean, I think in a way I did feel on the outside too, but I do think that Belgium was different in the age, right? Like, I mean, I was in college now, so I think that just generally the atmosphere of college, as far as, there were international students just like me. And so there was just like more of that sense than there was like in this high school that I was in. So I think that that's also where I started like really, just having this group of friends that were from many different places. And the other thing is, like, interestingly enough, Belgium was much more diverse as a country then than Spain was. The reason is, again, colonialism. Belgium has a long history of colonialism, just like any of the European countries, but there were a very large African community in Belgium from what was then, I'm going to age myself, Zaire was the country, which is Congo now. Yeah, but Zaire was a Belgian colony.
I was laughing to myself. I was thinking this. I probably shouldn't say this out loud. I'm going to say it anyways. I was thinking to myself, well, when is she going to get to meet some brothers? Like, some black folks? Like she's in Spain, Iran. When does the black folks come around? Because you clearly are not scared to be around black folks. Like, you fit around us like it's natural. So, like, she had to. When did she get around black folks? But okay. That you explain some of it. And even though I understand Africa is different from African American culture, I totally get that. People are listening. I do get the difference.
I totally get it too. I'm not trying to get. I'm just getting like that's how it was in Belgium, and so it was a very interesting time. And one of the important moments in my life was at that time that my mom got extremely sick, very, very, very sick. And my younger brother, who again, everybody remember, he's 10 years younger, came and lived with me through my college years. So I was literally a college student with now an 8-year-old that I was responsible for by myself.
In Belgium.
In Belgium.
Different country.
Different country.
So you had to make sure he was going to school.
Yeah, I took him to school, elementary school every day, made him his sandwiches. And
he was fed. So you
didn't have. He was fed.
You didn't have the full college experience then. Like you didn't have the full. No, you were basically a mom. You were basically a mom in college.
Yeah, I had a very different college experience.
So you've always had to kind of be responsible for yourself and responsible for others. Like right away, almost, right? I mean, even it's talking about watching people get shot off the roof. You said you were with your niece or your cousin. Was it your cousin?
Yeah.
You know, so like it seemed like you were always a person who was around other people, taking care of other people, a nurturer. Fascinating story. Okay, so you're in Belgium. Your brother's with you. You graduate. Mm-hmm. He's still in school there, right? Does he have to be in school? Is he still in school? Your brother?
He's still in school, so I graduate from college, and so I have to make a decision about what do we do. Like I have my younger brother, right? Do I stay in Belgium and like, you know, he stays with me, or do I go to graduate school? And you know, I kind of wanted to keep going to graduate school, and then so then I got actually accepted to graduate school with a scholarship. And so then it was like, oh, you get this scholarship to go to graduate school in the US, in California. So I couldn't bring my brother with me because, when you get into graduate school, you only get a visa for the person that's going to study and not the sibling. So I had to make a decision. So the decision with my family. So my brother at the time, my younger brother, went back to Iran to be with my father, and my mom, who was getting better, also moved back to Iran.
Wow.
And I took my 2 suitcases and came to California.
And so when you came, where in California?
Monterey, California.
Oh, like, wow. Okay.
So small graduate school, international graduate school that really, at the time was called the Monterey Institute for International Studies, not Middlebury College. And it was like 700 students from all over the world studying really what international policy, translation interpreting, conference interpreting, and really many of whom are in really diplomatic kind of corp around the world. So that's the graduate school. And my undergraduate was in translation and interpreting, that conference interpreting.
It's interesting because it's almost like your life would have prepared you to be someone who's doing international work. Like just with your background, it easily would see it'd be easy for someone doing this international, whatever it is, but working internationally from your background. It's interesting, but you landed in Madison and stuck in Madison, which we still haven't gotten there because, okay, how did you get to, so you go to college in California, you graduate, and then what happens?
Then I married somebody from Madison, and I also California was really an incredible place, but also a place where you could see just day in and day out, especially in the central coast of California, just the huge have and have nots and disparities, right?
Especially
that are very much race and class, right? Like very much. So, you would go inland 20 minutes and it's like Salinas Valley and the farm workers. And then it's like Pebble Beach. It's like, what is this? And a very divided, I think, in my experience was very, very divided around race and class. And you couldn't afford anything even back then. You can't afford to buy a house. There's no, there's no prospect of that. So anyways, so there's this position, the first position for an interpreter kind of coordinator at UW Hospital. And so it's we can move to Madison. And here's a position that's available. So I applied and I got the position and
So you got to
Here I am.
you got to Madison out of grad school, basically out of California.
A few years after grad school. So lived in California for maybe like 4 years after grad school.
And then you come to Madison. What was the weather like in Belgium? Was it cold in Belgium?
It's cold, not Madison cold.
Yeah, so like this.
It's more like that rainy kind of.
Okay.
Cold, but not Madison.
So coming here was like your really first time dealing with cold, like cold.
Actually, Iran is colder. Tehran is colder than Belgium in the winter.
What?
Have snow and big mountains.
But it's not colder. It's not colder than Madison, though.
No, not colder than Madison.
I'm talking about Madison.
Than Belgium. Yeah. Colder than Belgium. So I mean, it was my first time. Definitely not my first time with snow. But definitely cold. Yeah, hadn't experienced that level of cold before.
Okay. Well, that's a lot of journey. Whew. Okay.
I know. Are you tired? I'm feeling tired.
That's a whole journey. Okay, but your mom is better at this point. Your brothers in Iran, your dad and your mom's like they're back together, right? Together in Iran. I don't know what happened to your older brother at this time, but that's fine.
He's in Spain. He's in Spain.
He's in Spain.
And he's still in Spain.
He's still in Spain. Okay. Hi, hey, big brother. Looks like we have a lot in common, you and I. Okay, so you're now you're back. You were in California. You get married. Then you moved to Madison to be an interpreter. And what was your first perception of Madison getting here from your world experience?
My first experience was that it was a very quiet place. Just felt like a small, quiet place. And people were very, very nice. It seemed like they were very just nice, but I was kind of like,
you should see your face. Your face is like
I was kind of like, it almost seemed like very exaggerated even to me at that point. Now I know a lot more, but it was like, wow, like, hi, how are, and I was like, I don't know what that's about. That wasn't what I was used to. Like people greeting you at all times and things like that. So it was I felt like, oh, it's like just a nice little town. I also, in my work, because I started working right away, I kind of was seeing very, very clearly like the lack of understanding of experiences that were being, that we were seeing, right? So I was working as an interpreter with newly arrived Latinx immigrants, which that was a time in which we saw, kind of a big increase in our number of immigrant population.
What year was this around?
So we're talking about 1999, 98, 98 to 98, 99. So really big increase. And then people really not really connecting with that experience. And then what I realized very quickly is that the only connection people really seem to want to have or had with, I'm going to call it quote unquote diversity, was UW-Madison. Oh, like Shorewood Hills, or, like Eagle Heights. That was like the concept of diversity. And I was like people have nothing to do with the university. And they were like, oh, they're not here like as grads. It's like, no, like there's like, so anyway, so that I remember was like my thinking about like, oh, people don't seem to really know what's happening outside the university.
They're still going on. I always say someone who's from Madison, grew up here in Madison, I always say there's three different worlds. Like there's the campus area, the UW-Madison, like they said, there's the isthmus. That's where the political power and all that stuff is. People think progressives. Then there's, like I say, the real Madison. And those worlds never connect. Like they almost never connect. And UW-Madison's almost always isolated on this island, and you don't know what's going on up there. You know it's there, but you have no idea what's going on there. And they don't ever come out that bubble.
Our friend Brenda Gonzalez is working on that. So
we love Brenda.
We love Brenda. And that's what she's trying to do, and we love Lamar Billups and the South Madison part. I mean, so that's been an idea that like, it's been around, like to say, how do we connect these things? Because it's like, but anyway, so that's what I noticed.
Did you feel like an outsider here? Because, I was just wondering, your skin tone, you coming in, speaking 4 different languages, like how did Madison accept you? Because you're right, that's like before like Latino community, before they started to come here more. So like you were like kind of right when that was happening. There were some black folks were here, so that was But how were you perceived at that time? I would have paid money to see that too, to see how people interacted with you.
Hard for me to know how people were perceiving me. I think that what I can say is that in the Latinx community, I found like this community, right? Like because I was doing this work, and so there was this quick connection, and it was I think a time in which I did feel like there was this community that was embracing me, that was saying, yeah, like, this is great. Like, you're part of us. And again, in my heart, I was like, my heart is in many places, but one of the places was like, yeah, because even in California, I had already started doing some work with Latino immigrant, and so I was like, oh, this is, and so it was like, I felt completely embraced in the community. And then I started really meeting people, like having an ability to connect with other people in the Black and Latinx community, and I actually felt by Black and Latinx community very welcome in Madison. I think welcome in a different way than I had been in any of the other places where I had lived.
That's good. That's a applause more for Madison that we felt like you
Black
could
and Latinx community in Madison, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well,
I think in the larger community, I think I felt like that I was interesting.
Exotic.
Like that's so unique. And I mean, at some point, it really gets like, hey,
old. That's good. Old and insulting, probably tiring, right? And it had to be. I just know Madison, and I know people can look at you like, oh, she's so interesting. She's exotic. Like she can speak 4 different languages. Like what? Like, oh my gosh, I just want to have coffee with her.
Yeah. So it was like, yeah, let's stop that.
I can totally see it. I can totally see that. Okay, so you're here, and just for the sake of time, then you decided this crazy thing, get in politics and run for the city council. When was that?
So I ran for city council in 2008, right after President Obama behind me won the November election. So that evening, Fabiola, Hamden, Rizal, Sanderson, Brenda Gonzalez, and Shiva are like, wow, like, this is our country now. And, we feel like so great. And they're like, you should run for city council. I'm like, oh, like, that's a thing? You can just do that? And other people just rallied behind them. And so here I was, I ran for city council, and 2008 was it this? Yeah. And so then I ran and won the election in April of 2009. You've
done a lot in Madison. And actually, so you got here about 1996, sounds like?
97.
It's 97. Okay, I'm just curious. From 1997 to now in Madison, someone with your experience in the communities and the business world and the city council, you have a very unique perspective of where we are and where we've been. Where were we? Where are we now? and where do you think we have to go to be the city that we should be to reach our full potential?
I think where we were at the time was actually pretty invisible to those who weren't in our circles, like literally invisible. Like, oh, what are you talking about? Like who? And then we moved to, I think, people really knowing and understanding the presence and that it had been here forever. So that was the shift. And where we are now, I think, is that we definitely are at the table. And just like you've said in your own articles, we're at the table, like there is representation. I just reflect back to, I was at times the only woman of color on the city council. And so fast forward now, like it's awesome. So now I think that there is a shifting of being able to hold these positions. And so I think where we're going is to see if the system is going to allow for people at the table to really actually make decisions, shift, and do things differently. Or is it a point in time and the system is going to come back and just say, no, like we can't allow this, right? And the system, being, kind of these structures and white majority things that have worked for the white majority for a long time, or is the table going to really be able to change things? So that's to be seen. Next episode of Real Talk. That's to be seen, but I think that's where we are, and that's a pretty incredible, actually, shift to see.
Big.
I don't know that we take enough of a step back sometimes to see how big that difference is. But I remember when you were at Magnet, was that
Magnet? Yeah,
Magnet, yeah. And it was like nobody was talking about like young professionals of color. It's like it was like you were kind of like, hey, we want this city to be successful. We need to keep and attract and keep young professional of color. And it was like Henry Sanders talking about that, like who's like what? And now it's like a center of conversation to really at many tables to really be talking about that. So it's a shift. Again, remains to be seen whether those who have had power for such a long time are going to actually be willing to let it go.
Well, or how much they're going to fight to keep it, right?
Correct. So it's either let it go or they're going to fight to keep it in the Madison subtle ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's going to be harder for them to fight to keep it, though. I think time has shifted. Okay, 2 more questions. I'm going to let you go. One question, I'm just curious, hearing you, I know you, but I've just heard your story, which is so deep and so rich, and I wish we could dig into more of that Iran and you leaving and all that stuff, because that part is like, we don't hear that story a lot here in the United States from that perspective. Mm-hmm. But who is Shiva? Like, how would you define you? Like you have such an eclectic background and different experiences. Like, how would you explain yourself? Like, your background is so rich and different.
How would I explain myself? I mean, I always say, well, like, I'm Shiva, right? Like, I know my experience is different and it doesn't fit in a box, but it is who I am. And it's all of those layers. And I have a hard time with boxes because it don't fit the box. People say, well, you're not, Latina, you're not. And it's like, part of me is. That's kind of the culture I grew up with. That's the culture that I identify with in so many ways. Totally. And so who is telling me that I'm not? Based on what? Is it like your blood or is it? And then, so there is so much that
and how Latina was made, the word that was made up, all that stuff. We can
correct. So you can go back and it's like, who's decided that, is it a drop of blood? Is it 2 drops? And if we start taking our blood and go do our like roots, we all may find out that none of us fit in a box. So how do we deal with that? So anyways, so I reflect on that a lot. So I always think about myself as not like, I I think the best way that I can try to define myself is that I always try to be a bridge, and that I hope that I do work that really is about kindness and bridging. I think kindness and compassion, and that's kind of at the end of the day when I say, well, I don't know, like this was like bad, and I said, where is, like, I need to find kindness and compassion back and move forward. So that's what kind of, those are the things that drive me. And then what drives me is, in addition to that, is the beauty that I've seen in all the places I've been, and of really being able to embrace individuals and people for what they bring, and not feeding into systems that have been created to really truly divide us in crazy ways.
That's awesome.
That's
awesome. Okay, last question. If you have any superpower in the world, because you are super duper, like what would that superpower be? Any superpower.
Any superpower? I would love to speak every language in the world. And the reason I say that is because the ability to speak languages really allows us to listen very carefully to people and to better understand. People express themselves in so many beautiful ways in their different languages that really tells you a lot about them. And so anyways, I just would love to, because then everybody's communicating. Like everybody's actually talking through me. So I would love it. Like being able to like be the person that can have everybody speak.
And everyone's voice be heard.
Through me.
Thank you, Shiva, for your time. I think Madison owes you a debt of gratitude for all the work you've put in since '97 to now. You hit the road running hard and helping our community in real ways and connecting. You said the bridge, like connecting our community in real ways. And I think your answer at the end sums up who you are in my book. A person who wants to hear everyone's voices in really authentic ways, but wants them to speak from their voice and wants to know that they're heard and that you heard them. And that also that I heard you. Not only that I hear you, I'm with you and I will help you fight the fights that you need to fight to get where you need to get. That fits you so much. And that is the best answer I've heard from Superpower. Because it explains who you are. Like, I think that answer is at the core of who you are. And I love that about you, Shiva. I think that you're fantastic. And Madison, we owe you a debt of gratitude. Thank you. You've just done so much. I owe a debt of gratitude to Madison for bringing so much to my life, to be honest with you, and meeting people like you, who have taught me so much and have helped me really see things and understand things. So I am because of all the people that have helped me understand and continue to help me understand. And I always welcome that moment in which somebody says, no, let me explain. Let me explain. That's because awesome. I know my experience is very different than the experience of anybody else. But I can only bring to it my commitment to that I want to do it in authentic ways.
This is 365 Media.